Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or whenever you should happen to find this. This is episode 19 of the Quote of Arms podcast. I am here today with...
Hi, I'm Colton, aka SnapBoltBaral.
Great to have you, Colton. I am Coach J-Ro, the Unsummoned Skull, the host with the most. And on this podcast, we like to talk about people's favorite tribes, what they like, or what the tribes are like, what they like about them, and how those tribes relate to them and either them personally, their views of fantasy, things like that. So, with a name like SnapBoltBaral, can you tell me a little bit more about the how you got that name?
So, it's just kind of three of my favorite magic cards put together. So, Snapcaster Mage, Lightning Bolt, and Baral Chief of Compliance. I'm pretty well known in the local community as one of the local Storm players, so that's where Baral comes from. And of course, Snapcaster Mage and Bolt is just a classic magic combination that I love to play. So that's how that kind of came about.
And Snapcaster Mage and Baral both happen to be of the tribe that we are going to be talking about today, eh?
Yep, they sure are.
And that tribe is?
Today we're talking about wizards.
Of or relating to the coast, or some other variant?
Either or.
Just the fun. I'm going to make terrible jokes because that's kind of something I do. So.
Yeah, but wouldn't be Coach without a joke.
Oh, yeah. So, we could start with just Snapcaster Mage and Baral. So, what do wizards usually do in Magic besides make it?
So, one of the more interesting things about wizards to me is the fact that they are a class rather than a race. So they fit in with they kind of go across a bunch of different other race tribes like elves and humans and merfolk and so on and so forth. So they kind of get to piece themselves together out of a bunch of different other tribes. But the main thing that wizards do is they are supported primarily with instants and sorceries. So they do a lot of instant and sorcery support, whether it be something like Snapcaster Mage that flashes one back, Baral, and Goblin Necromancer that reduce their costs. Just those kinds of things. They really, really work well with spell slinging, which is one of my favorite things to do in Magic.
Oh, absolutely, one of mine as well. I love spell swinging, especially in weird ways. And Strixhaven was an awesome set for that.
Oh yeah, Strixhaven is such a blast. It really shows like just even how you can spell sling just out of your standard blue-red colors as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my favorites that I've made out of there, and yeah, we're gonna go on some tangents, is Black's Vexing Pest. They made a black-green spell slinger deck that's designed to trigger prowess and it's designed to trigger prowess and magecraft from the command zone by casting the search instead of Black's himself.
Ah, okay.
And then you can even do some cool things like cast search for Blacks, put it in the graveyard. It goes back as the front face, and then you can use a reanimation spell on Blacks himself.
Ooh, reanimation is always a fun time.
Yep. There's all kinds of cool things that Strixhaven opened. And Strixhaven was an awesome set for a variety of different spellcasting classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially I think in the red and white color combination, it really helped kind of open up the Boros colors a little bit more towards things other than just play creature, play equipment, bonk your opponent, play creature, play equipment, bonk your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
It gave it a little bit more of a third dimension in terms of the Boros colors are still very combat focused, but it also gives you more interesting ways to make like combat relevant or to make your creatures a little bit more interesting than just how much damage can they output per mana.
Yeah, that was the sort of thing that kind of disappointed me with Lorehold, though, is how much the commanders cost.
Mm-hmm. That was a little bit sad.
I was actually happy, though, when They came out, I think it was the first of the Innistrad, so the Midnight Hunt, when they came out
Mhm.
with Rem Carolus,
Oh, I
because
can't remember what that one does.
that one increases direct damage by 1, I believe.
Mm.
So non-combat
Okay.
damage by 1. So what I liked about that was that it enabled a different play style for the color.
Mm.
To
Gotcha.
basically, uh, yes, Fire Song and Sunspeaker can be a burn commander, but this really enabled red-white burn.
Right. Because burn is a very popular 60 card archetype, but it's
Mm-hmm.
generally not super good in commander, just because of the fact that you're trying to deal so much more damage and a lot of damage does not scale very well.
Yeah. There are a couple of other ways to do it. Like I think Gisela Blade of Gold Knight doubles the damage.
Mhm.
And I actually made a deck designed around doubling damage like that.
Yeah, Giselle's a real fun time.
Mm-hmm.
For a while I had a Gisela stacks list that pretty much made it so that each player could only have one creature, and most of the time my Gisela is going to beat your creature.
Oh, that's nice.
Or so I'd make it so that my opponents can attack me, or they'd have to attack each other, or you could only have one creature, or only one creature could attack or block, which always ended up in Gisela's favor, since she always did huge amounts of damage by herself.
Oh yeah, and having vigilance helps.
Mm-hmm. And flying as well. Being
Yep.
able to just get over most things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, she's an angel, not a wizard. So I think you should probably talk a little bit more about some of the wizards that I really liked.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go on tangents a little bit. It kind of happens. So, so talking about wizards. So this is a different class that is that has red in it, and you can have angelic wizards, but there aren't really a lot of those. So, what colors are wizards primarily in?
So primarily, wizards is what I like to call a blue-based tribe. So, like how elves is typically a green-based tribe. There are other colors that go with it, but most commonly it's green-based. Elves, wizards, sorry, are mostly blue-based. You can find them in most color combinations, but their primary color is definitely blue, and then their secondaries are black and then red, is what I would say, especially when they're combined with blue. So you got a lot of like blue-black wizards, blue-red wizards, mono-blue wizards, and then some black and red wizards.
It seems like a lot of the legends recently have been blue-red wizards.
Yes, there's a lot of blue-red legendary wizards. There's a whole bucket load.
So, what are some of the ones that you have played with or built around?
So the one that I currently have built that is a tribal commander is Inala, Archmage Ritualist, which is from the 2017 Wizards Precon. And then I also have Mizzix of the Magnus as another deck, as an Izzet Spellslinger deck. And they kind of do two very different things. So Inala is a very tribal heavy focus deck that wins. It does typically win through a combo, but it's more of a board state kind of deck. It focuses more on the board state, whereas Mizzix is a blue-red combo deck that doesn't really care much about the board. It focuses more on what's important on the stack, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So the primary way that Inala wins is say one card combo with the card Wonderwine Prophets. So what Wonderwine Prophets does is it's 4 blue for a Merfolk Wizard. It's a 4/4. And it's a champion of Merfolk, which means that when it enters the battlefield, you just sacrifice it unless you exile another Merfolk. And then when Wonderwine Prophets leaves play, that Merfolk comes back to the battlefield. And it says, whenever Wonderwine Prophet deals common damage to a player, you may sack a Merfolk, and if you do, take an extra turn. And then Inala's Eminence ability is, whenever a non-token wizard enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 and create a copy of that wizard, and it gains haste, and you exile in the next end step. So there's an interaction where Wonder One Prophet enters the battlefield. The champion trigger goes on the stack, and then Nala's Eminence ability is on the stack. You pay 1, create a copy of the Wonder Wine Prophets, and you put the copy of the Wonder Wine Prophets on top of the original copy, so you exile the original copy. And this one has haste, so you attack a person for 4, then its ability goes on the stack where you sacrifice a merfolk, gain an extra turn. You sacrifice the token, the original one comes back, then you can make another token, and then it just generates you in infinite turns if you're able to keep hitting someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that the deck primarily clears the board is, this is the one deck that I play Cyclonic Rift in. Cyclonic Rift is a very powerful card. It's also a lot of people don't really like Cyclonic Rift because it has a really bad reputation. But I play it in this deck because, I can abuse it a little bit with cards like Archaeomancer that can get it back. And especially with this deck where a lot of my creatures are not very big, most of my creatures are very, very small with a small handful of exceptions. But for the Wonder Wine Prophets combo to go off, I have to have an opponent with an empty board state. And the best way to get a completely empty board state is to play Cyclonic Rift on end of turn, and then go for the Wonder Wine Prophet combo. So yeah, and the other way that this deck clears the board is Galecaster Colossus, which is 5 blue for a 5/6 giant wizard, and it says untap an untapped wizard you control, or turn target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. So this deck can play a pretty good board control game as well. And it helps clear the way for the Wonder Wine Prophets to start hitting opponents and getting those extra turns and getting more wizards on the board, and eventually overwhelming the opponent and swinging against everyone for game.
Awesome. So one of the things that wizards are known for is these intricate combos. Especially thinking of ones that are... I think there were a couple from Dominaria that did some crazy things with and battlefield effects. I think one of them was Noyan. No, not Noyandar. Noyandar is somebody else. But there were a couple from Dominaria that did crazy things with end of the battlefield effects and.
Yeah, Naban. Mm-hmm. I think is might be the one you're thinking of.
Yeah.
That doubles enter the battlefield effects. There's also the one. She's 2 blue, and I don't remember what she does, but I know that she can go infinite with another card as well.
Narumeha?
Narumeha.
Yep.
So yeah, wizards are not stat-wise very powerful creatures, typically. They're typically pretty underpowered in terms of just pure stat line.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of their abilities don't tend to be super individually powerful, but they tend to be a very good support for something else. So, like, a lot of wizards are known for returning spells back to the hand, or giving you, especially with instants and sorceries, wizards do a lot of things that help push instants and sorceries to the next level. So getting to cast things like Cyclonic Rift multiple times is often extremely backbreaking in a game of Commander.
Oh yeah, and there are plenty of infinite combos that wizards are able to do when you get certain combinations of cards together, like a couple Archaeomancer effects and and the ability to bring back a Ghostly Flicker.
Yeah, and there's also your classic dual caster mage combos.
Mm-hmm.
That can just go infinite and deal a lot of damage. There's just a lot of weird rules interactions that wizards have that I really enjoy playing, exploiting, and trying to figure out. How did I make this card that is on its surface isn't very powerful and is something that can win the game.
Yeah, one of the awesome things about wizards is that they have a lot of play to them. You take a wizard deck, the game isn't gonna go the same way twice.
Yeah, wizards tend to be a very non-linear tribe, which I also really like. I like playing decks like Merfolk and Elves and Dragons, but a lot of those decks are also kind of known for a very linear game plan. It's a very good game plan. I mean, Elf Ball is an extremely powerful deck. But, when you sit down and play Elves, you often know what you're going to do with the Elves is you play a bunch of Elves, they Crater Hoof and swing. When you're playing Dragons, your goal is I'm going to just camp out as quick as possible, play my humongous dragons that all have, crazy abilities and swing for a lot of damage. With wizards, you don't really have either of those options because they don't snowball a lot like elves do. They don't have a lot of backbreaking lords like merfolk do. They don't have humongous creatures like dragons do, or anything like that. They just all have like really weird, intricate abilities that just kind of work together in a more puzzle PC way.
Mm-hmm. And to me, wizards embody what makes blue such a difficult color for new players, but such a rewarding color for those who are willing to work through and figure things out a little bit.
So blue is a very difficult color for a couple of reasons. First is when you play blue, you have a target on your back. It doesn't matter, like, for instance, my Anala deck plays 0 counterspells. I play 1 counterspell in the entire deck.
Mm-hmm.
99, there's exactly 1 counterspell, and it costs 5 mana. But whenever you play any sort of blue deck, people are always going to be looking at you to counter their stuff. Justly or unjustly. If I'm playing, like, my Mystics deck, people are looking at me like they're going to counter the spell. I'm going to, that's pretty fair. I play a certain amount of counterspells in that deck. The other couple hard things about blue is blue relies a lot more on the stack than it does the board. Blue's creatures tend to not be very powerful in general in terms of stat, especially in stat lines. Abilities tend to be a little bit weaker than those of, say, black or green. And your removal options in blue, and especially in mono blue, are not super great. Wizards has released a couple of kill spells now that are available to blue, but you're primarily trying to counter spells because you can bounce anything you want in blue, but just removing permanents is extremely difficult. So, and using counter spells is really is one of the most challenging things to learn how to do, because you have to know, like, is this thing that's going to hit the board, is it a threat, and is it going to become a threat? And you have to make that decision right now. If someone plays, a toothy imaginary friend, you have to know right then and there if it's worth countering, because toothy can get really huge, and if it dies, it draws them a bunch of cards. Or it could just sit there and draw them 1 card if it dies, and it costs them like 4, 6, or 8 mana or something like that. You don't know that up front. Whereas if you play cards like Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile or Doomblade that can reactively get rid of that, it can sit there and become a threat to somebody else, or it can sit there and do nothing, and you have more options in terms of when you want to get rid of that specific permanent.
I do like how you mentioned a little while ago about bouncing stuff. So that's something I feel is underrated, especially in Commander, because of how long it takes for the turn to come back around.
Yeah, and it can be really helpful, but sometimes, especially if you're playing against a lot of coaches decks, bouncing coaches stuff is usually not a good plan.
Yes, I would say in general though, bouncing stuff is a good plan.
In general, it is.
Bouncing stuff. I would say is almost the same as removal.
It
Well,
really
I
depends
call it
on
removal,
what
but
it is.
I would say that it's almost the same as just straight up killing it, except from a political standpoint, you didn't get rid of their card or their ability to use it. At least not immediately. So.
Yeah, and sometimes the thing that you want to bounce is detrimental, especially if you're playing against a lot of ETBs. Like bouncing a crater hoof is not generally the play. Yeah, bouncing a lot of stuff can be good, but it also gives you. It feels like to me, especially for a lot of nerd players, it feels like you're more pressured to try to figure out. Well, I bounce this thing, but now how do I get rid of it permanently? If that makes sense.
Yeah, if somebody cast a crater hoof, that means that they just added a lot of power to the board. So bouncing the crater hoof is good, but it means that you have to have a plan for it when it comes back down. That's where you're mentioning counter spells. You might not have, say, 3 mana up for your counter spell if you're playing, say, cancel or something like that. I don't know why you would cancel, but something of that to that effect. Let's say you have a 3 mana counter, but having 1 mana for unsummon lets you at least live the turn, and then when they try to cast it again, you know to leave the mana up. But you might not have known to leave it up the first time. That's where unsummons can help with those tempo-related plays.
Yeah, unsummons can help, especially one of my favorite decks to play outside of Commander is Mono Blue Fairies and Pauper. And the cards like Snap can sometimes be absolutely backbreaking.
Different kind of Snap from the one in your name, eh?
Yeah, one of the most backbreaking plays you can make in Pauper is snapping back someone's Gurmag Angler.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can guarantee you that they probably delved away their entire graveyard to get down that Gurmag Angler, and it is gone, and you just drew a card.
Yep.
And that snapping or if you're snagging back a Gurmag Angler feels really good.
Yeah, especially because Spellstutter Sprite isn't going to be able to counter it easily, but if it's stuck in their hand, they can't put it back down.
Yeah, it's now you have a 7 mana fish. Good luck casting that. So
you can say blue kind of forces people to play fair.
Yeah, it does in some ways. Like, for instance, in the Eternal formats, cards like Force of Negation and Force of Will are available to help balance out the format a little bit.
Back to basics, I think.
Yeah, but blue also can play some extremely oppressive cards that people really do not like. Stasis being one of them.
Yeah, Thassa's Oracle and...
yeah, Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, that kind of stuff. So blue is kind of the police color in a lot of ways. It kind of... It's the color that lets you dig for unfair things, but also lets you counter those unfair things with fair things. So, like, your counter spells can be used fairly to stop your opponent's reanimate to get back Shieldred, or it can be used super unfairly to cast a mystical tutor to get your Psychondrift to bounce your opponent's boards and kill them.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and even cards like Force of Will can be used very fairly by stopping your opponent's Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation combo, or it can be used very unfairly to protect said Force of Will, to protect said Demonic Consultation Thassa's Oracle combo. So yeah, blue has had a very long and very hard reputation with Magic players, and also cards like like your basic cantrips and draw spells in blue, it's often very hard to figure out what to do with them. Like when do you cast them? When do you hold up mana, cast counter spells? Because one of the big, huge downsides of playing counter spells is that sometimes nothing is counterable, so you just sat there and didn't use 2 or 3 mana. So you're down a certain amount of mana as opposed to the rest of the table.
Yeah, and you kind of have to leave it up in order for it to be useful, because it's not usually going to be useful on your own turn.
No, it's usually not. I mean, if you're playing something like, say, a Wrath of God, you can just, if you know you're going to play Wrath of God, you can just tap out and use all your mana to do whatever you need to do. But if you know you have to hold up a counter spell, you're kind of just stuck there holding up the 1, 2, 3, 5, however much mana you're using, and if it comes back around you didn't use it, well, you just lost that resource, and it really feels bad a lot of the time.
That's where, if I'm going to play counter spells, especially in Commander, I like them to also be able to do something else. Like there's a 3 mana one from, I think, one of the Nicol Bolas sets that counters a spell unless they pay a certain amount, or you can look at the certain amount of cards and put one of them in your hand. So at least it's not a dead spell.
Oh, what's that card? I play it in my Mizzix list.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, especially because it's mostly generic mana.
Yeah, that's one of those. So Mizzix is one of those decks where I play a pretty good amount of counter spells, primarily because blue and red and Commander have a pretty hard time dealing with big creatures and enchantments.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that I'm able to counteract that playing the blue deck is I also play a lot of instant speed draw spells. So your Glimmer of Geniuses, your Hieroglyphic Illuminations, a lot of 3-4 mana cards that just let you draw 2 or draw 3 cards deeper into the deck, so that I'm not wasting that mana resource. So if I'm holding up 4 mana, and nothing comes around the table that's worth countering, okay, pay 4 mana, cast Fact or Fiction. It doesn't feel that bad.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that you balance, especially in the deck where you play a lot of counter spells, making sure that you have other ways to use your mana at instant speed, so it doesn't just go to waste. And for a lot of newer players, these counters are really, really powerful, but they can also bite you if you don't know how to use them properly. They're a little bit more intricate to learn how to use than just how to cast, just casting a creature, because you have to know what. A lot of counter spells work based on your format knowledge and what your knowledge of what cards do and how they combine with other cards. So you have to know a lot about what does your opponent's card do, and why is that a problem for you.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, when you're playing the control side, I would say every deck in Commander though is basically a mid-range deck. But if you're playing the control part of mid-range, you do need to understand what makes the opponent's deck tick, what are the threats for the table. So threat analysis becomes magnified when your deck is reactive.
Yeah, that's why, especially one of my other favorite decks to play, Muldrotha, I have a much lower win percentage with it, specifically because Muldrotha is a very, very interactive control deck. It's not a very proactive deck, but it also doesn't play hard. I think I play 1 counter spell in the entire deck. So it's all about trying to figure out what is the threat on board and what is going to try to kill me, and what's going to try to kill the table. And that's a very, very hard thing to do, especially if you don't know the players that you're playing with very well. You don't know the decks that they are playing very well.
And that's where in blue you want to be able to have the flexibility to go back and forth between offense and defense and try to walk that middle ground rather than just being purely reactive. So I have an Atlas deck that has a lot of cheap wizards and has a lot of ways to make wizard tokens and flood the board that way and then go wide. I have a Rael deck that cycles through a lot of cards, puts a lot of instant sorcerers in the graveyard, makes her unblockable, and then wins a commander damage. So having the ability to turn those defensive or reactive cards into offensive advantage, or use those counter spells to protect threats instead of answering threats, is a way to sort of play blue on slightly easier mode.
Yeah, and also, say I've learned playing, if you're going to play a more heavy control deck in Commander, is finding, which it sucks to say, a lot of good board wipes, or ways to keep the board clearer. You don't need to completely clear, but ways that can, because trading one, especially trading 1-for-1 in Commander, is very not helpful to you. It's a huge disadvantage because down a card, one opponent's down a card, and 2 other players didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also a balance of finding out, like, okay, if you're going to play these types of cards, like counterspell, single target removal, how many do you play, and how do you make sure that you're not playing too many so that you're putting yourself down on cards, and how are you finding ways to make up that lost card advantage, and ways that you're not just trading 1-for-1 with your opponent.
Yeah, I'd also look into ways to do those jobs that you need to get done, like play counter spells, with some sort of an advantage. So soul manipulation counters a creature spell, or returns a creature card from your grave to your hand. So that's a 2-for-1 instead of just being a reactive counter spell. That really swings things in your favor and can contribute towards your offensive game plan instead of just reacting.
Yeah, and that's where cards like Cryptic Command and Mystic Confluence really, really shine.
Mm-hmm.
Get 4 mana, counter a spell, draw a card.
Yeah, modal spells are awesome like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they allow you to do a variety of different jobs. That's one of the things I talk about I write about in my EDH track articles. So those different jobs the deck needs to do and how you can find cards that do more than one job.
And so, like in Mizzix, one of the reasons why I play a decent amount of counterspells in that deck as opposed to other decks is that counterspells are often another easy way to just get more experience counters on Mizzix, on opponents' turns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I may not always be countering the biggest thing, but if I'm paying that 1 mana to get my second experience counter, and that makes my next 2 spells cost 2 less, well, it just paid for itself, and then typically those 2 cards are going to draw me more cards. So you have to find ways to make your counter spells more than just blue counter target spell. You have to find ways to make them, I wouldn't say just more useful, but like more, how do they help progress your game plan?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, counter spell is another example. You can play Negate, sure. Negate's a perfectly fine card. But if you're in blue-black or Grixis, Counter Squall counters a spell, and counters the non-creature spell, and costs them 2 life.
Yep. Or something like Absorb and Azorius that can gain you 3 life, and Azorius, I'm not particularly known for it. There are life gain decks available in Azorius.
And you just with blue-white as the base, like Oloro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where you typically like a blue-white black or blue-white green deck, and just getting that free life gain trigger, that's never a bad thing. Or with the counter squall, sometimes there are a lot of blue-black X-base decks that if your opponent loses life, you get to trigger something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, getting those just free triggers are always good.
Yeah, the deck I was just looking at when I was making those references is I have a blue-black burn deck that I built recently. It has both of those in there because those are ways to do the jobs and then do something else.
Yep. One of my favorite ones I've seen is Ionize from the last Ravnica block from Guilds. It's 1 blue-red, our target spell. It deals 2 damage, 2 or 3 damage to that player.
Mm-hmm. But Undermine is a very similar spell for Dimir.
Yeah, and their counterspell is also pretty similar. With I and I, with it being in red, I've seen people play it with, you have a Torbrand plus a Furnace of Wrath plus a Dictate of the Twin Gods. It sounded like you countered your opponent's spell and they took 10 damage. That's a good chunk of life that you just knocked out of them for 3 mana, and you got rid of their spell.
One of my favorite counterspells of all time, AX and then deal X. I have to remember the name of it because I haven't used it in a long time, but I love the spell. Mind Swipe.
Mind Swipe. I think I know that one, but I can't remember exactly what it does.
Blue-red X, counter target spell unless its controller pays X. It deals X damage to the spell's controller. Even if they pay the X, they still take the fireball.
Oof. Yeah. One of my favorite ones is, let me find it. It's the only counterspell I play in Muldrotha. I used to have a couple of counters in Muldrotha, but then since it's a permanent-based deck rather than a spell-based deck, I took most of them out, except for one. I need to find it. Hold on. Okay. Perplex. So Perplex is 1 blue-black, counter target spell unless its controller discards their hand. But it also has Transmute for 1 blue-black. So it's either a counter spell or whatever 3 mana thing you want in your deck.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I have.
Okay. Yeah. Like in this deck, it can be a Phyrexian Arena, it could be Compulsive Research, it could be a Ashen of Remembrance to help start during my opponent's life, it could be even a Kodama's Reach. Just having that extra, it does 2 things. It does more than just counter target spell.
That flexibility and the ability to have it maneuver towards your game plan, awesome. Yeah, I have Plasm Capture in my Frog deck. Grolnok, for green, blue, counter target spell beginning of your next pre-combat main phase, add X mana and any combination of colors. Rexes the spell's mana value.
Oh, so it's like another mana drain.
Yeah. Except it's a lot cheaper. Money-wise.
Yeah, no kidding.
Money-wise, yeah. It's also just I would call it more the one that makes treasure than mana drain.
Yeah, the treasure one's pretty good. I've tried it in a couple of my decks, and it's one of those cards that you either are really, really good at playing or really, really bad at playing, and I'm really, really bad at playing that card.
Yeah, you have to wait for them to do something that's worth it.
And sometimes you're just leaving 6 mana open and it doesn't do anything, and you just kind of are very sad.
5, I think, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing with just counterspells in general, is just knowing. It's also like how much mana are you going to leave up every turn? And a lot of decks really can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
Like they can't afford to leave 2, 3, 4 mana. Like, for instance, Adelies is very much not a leave up 3 mana every turn kind of deck. It's a go wide, play all my stuff, punch you in the face for a bucket load of damage kind of deck. And it is very, very good at that. And it will kill you very, very quickly. So, yeah, and all is kind of like that too, I don't leave a lot of mana open very often. Because I'm trying to get a board presence with my wizards, because they're not very big, but they also kind of trigger off each other, where I have things like Azami, where I can use them to draw cards, Gatecrasher Colossus to bounce things, my Arcanus, happen to draw 3 cards. Some of them have abilities where I can draw extra cards, or filter, or copy instant or sorcery. I'm not just, even though I'm playing a blue deck, I typically don't leave very much mana open in this deck. Maybe 1 or 2, because I'm trying to maximize my output of my wizards every single turn. I don't want to just sit there and try to counter something. That's not what this deck is designed to do.
Yeah, Zami is one of the old school wizard commanders.
Yeah, Zombie is very much a all-in mono blue combo deck. You play your Azami, you cast your play a bunch of really cheap wizards, 1 and 2 drop wizards that you can use to just dig through your deck, hang your mind over matter, slam your Thassa's Oracle, win the game.
Yep.
Which is fine, it's not a terrible deck. It's just that's what the deck typically does. That's what it's known for doing. And it's very, very good at that. I've lost to it many times.
Oh yeah. And it's fairly efficient at it, and it's in the right colors to be able to protect it.
You just play a bunch of cheap 1 and 2 mana counters, and 1 and 2 mana wizards that you don't really care what they do. They just are, 1 mana, draw 3 cards often. And that's really, really insane. So yeah, that's why I really enjoy wizards. It's traditionally it's a little bit less of a linear tribe. It doesn't have a lot of raw power like a lot of other tribes do. Like I think overall wizards is probably less powerful than, say, elves. Less powerful than elves, less powerful than just merfolk, less powerful than dragons. Probably less powerful than humans too, to be honest. But it doesn't have as much power, but it has a lot more intricacy than a lot of other traditional commander tribes have.
Absolutely. Now, is there anything about wizards themselves, like the art or the design, that speaks to you?
Some of the art is really cool. Like, Cass is probably one of my favorite arts in all of Magic. Just her kind of floating and just her, like, just what she does, and it's very clear, I feel like, in her artwork, what Cass does and what you're supposed to do with her. And Cass in her art is telling you, I cast powerful spells, play me, and cast very powerful spells. And I really enjoy that. Cass is my favorite CEDH commander. One day I hope to be able to afford to build it, but it's very, it's a very heavy storm deck, and he's even seen play in Legacy. She's not played for Legacy in a while, and people have been trying her out in Modern, but she's, she just straight up tells you in her art, I am here to cast powerful spells in your deck. Snapcaster Mage to me is also very similar. Either art, the original or the Modern Masters art, where Snapcaster Mage tells you that, hey, I am here to help you cast powerful spells. You should put powerful spells in your deck. Awesome. That's what I really, really like about those kinds of arts.
And we mentioned before you started that you were a D&D player. Have you ever tried playing a wizard?
Yeah, so Wizard used to be my favorite class to play in 3.5. And then when I got older and 5e became more common, I started playing 5e, I switched to playing sorcerers more often. In the current campaign, I play a half-elf sorcerer. My character's background is he's a half-elf sorcerer who dropped out of wizard school because, well, he just wasn't that good at it. But he's decided he's like, screw being a wizard, I'll just do my sorcery stuff. And he walks around with a pointy hat and a big cape and a big quarterstaff to pretend like he's a wizard, but he's actually a sorcerer.
Nice. So what's the difference between wizards and sorcerers in D&D?
The difference is that wizards learn their spells through study, and all of their attacks are based on wisdom, whereas sorcerers are innately imbued with a form of magic. They just kind of don't really learn the spell, they just kind of know this, they just know naturally what to do. It's like, oh, I just point my hand at something and boom, magically fireball comes out. Whereas a wizard has a um, has a wand, and they go, okay, well, I have this tome of 55 different spells I can learn, and this one says cast fireball. Boom, out of my wand comes a fireball. So wizards are able to learn more spells because they're studying, but it takes them more time to learn them. And a sorcerer is a charisma-based character, and a wizard is a wisdom-based character. So I just like playing. I like playing sorcerers because um, I like playing like bard type characters, but not playing bards themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I like playing extremely persuasive characters. Like in our previous couple sessions, we've been my little brother's the DM, and we were playing in like 1920s New York. It's we're in the middle of a mob war, and we are the Warzone Syndicate fighting against a subset of the Gruul Syndicate. I don't. That's my brother's just sense of humor, and so like we've been getting through whole hordes of goblins just by me talking my way through it, and sometimes it's just absolutely hilarious to just tell the goblins, "Hey, I'm supposed to be here," and they're like, "Okay," just kind of believe me, and it's pretty great.
It's kind of like Obi-Wan with the Stormtrooper.
Yeah, it's literally that. It's not the droid you're looking for.
I am the wizard that it's supposed to be here.
Yes, I'm the wizard dropout that's supposed to be here. So yeah, my character is very arrogant, and it's pretty funny because he'll in last week's session, I had my character did had a jazz off against a bard goblin. That was pretty entertaining.
Nice.
My character conjured up a fake alto sax and cast minor illusion and managed to cheat my way to winning the jazz off. So the bard was so impressed he told us where this bad guy's hideout was. So that was pretty fun.
Nice.
So yeah, but to me that's the difference between wizards and sorcerers is sorcerers just kind of know some things and they're kind of naturally imbued with power. Wizards work for it. Wizards tend to know more things. Sorcerers just kind of have the feeling, the vibe. Just kind of point their hand and something comes out. Which with sorcerers can often be really entertaining when they have wild magic, and sometimes they try to cast Firebolt, and they cast a level 9 Fireball instead on accident, and they blow up an entire room. Oops. So, yeah, that's to me what's in between a sorcerer and a wizard. Like in Marvel, for instance, I think one of the biggest, so they say when they make sure that they call Doctor Strange a sorcerer, whereas, what's her name? Whereas Scarlet Witch is a witch. Scarlet Witch is more of a wizard character, whereas this was more of a wizard character because she has a sorcerer power, but she has to read a lot to know what she's doing. Whereas Doctor Strange is kind of just knows. It feels like he just kind of knows already what he's doing. He just kind of goes around and pretty quickly picks it up. Where Scarlet Witch can do some things. She got that power, but she really doesn't know the full extent of her power until she really buckles down and studies what she's supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm not too big in the Marvel universe, but I've seen some interesting things, and Scarlet Witch is certainly an intriguing character, especially when it comes to brainwashing an entire town.
Yeah, she has Yeah, her backstory is very tragic and goes a lot into mental health and abuse and those kinds of very unfortunate topics, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, Jedi are sorcerers. Jedi are definitely sorcerers. They are not they're people call them space wizards. They are space sorcerers.
I would almost say they're more like clerics.
Kind of close to clerics, but mind trick is definitely, I feel like, more of a sorcerer ability than a cleric ability.
It depends on the domain, I suppose, because not all clerics are good. But I do feel like their power mostly comes from their belief rather than from the inherent power.
A Jedi's power comes from those around them, so maybe it's a little bit more cleric-y. Like, when things die, Jedi suffer because the Force is dying, therefore they are dying. But it's the opposite for the Sith. People die and they lose their Force. So something dies in the Force and it gives the dark side strength. I don't know. I read a lot. I read too much into Star Wars.
Well, if you ever want to do something about that, I did do a Star Wars one-shot last May the 4th. I might run it again. I might run another either one-shot. Either run another one-shot or do a full campaign.
It sounds like it would be super cool. I just wanted to do a Star Wars. I know that there is Star Wars TTRPG available, but I've never been able to play it.
Yeah, I made a simplified version of it so that it's easier to stream and it's easier to just pick up. So it's a more streamlined version, but it's still fairly complex because there's so much there.
Yeah, Star Wars has a lot of stuff behind it. Yeah, Star Wars is a very, very large universe with a lot of so many different factions, so many different people that do different things. Different kinds of Force users and non-Force users, so many different jobs you can do. Just a very, very big place.
Oh, yeah. See, the full campaign that I led of it was actually inspired by Breaking Bad.
Ooh. That's heavy.
So there was a Jedi that... a former Jedi that was kicked out of the Order. And that Jedi was found by a guy who had a battle droid and was the mechanic on a ship, and the guy controlling the ship was a smuggler. And those are the player characters.
Oh boy.
And it turns out that he was kicked out of the Order because they needed him to not be associated with the Jedi in order to carry out a certain mission and everything was kind of like planned a certain way so that he would be the one, or so that he would be found by these people, carry out the mission, and not be tied back to the Jedi.
Okay. What time period did you set this campaign in?
Most of the ones that I do are Old Republic.
Like 4,000. Like, are we talking like Revan era Old Republic?
I'm talking about like pre-KOTOR.
Okay, pre-Mandalorian Wars, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think about it kind of like, I guess you could say sort of like post-navigation this world, except with more technology.
Yeah, so back when the Republic was still in a heavy exploration phase, and it wasn't a true monolithic galactic-wide culture yet.
Outside of basic being an understood language, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because the Republic, yeah, at that point, they're around, I guess.
Hmm. And even on
I,
some planets, basic wasn't really understood.
yeah, and you constantly had to, like, planets like Corellia and Coruscant talking about who was the better planet and infighting all the time.
Hmm.
Yeesh. I could talk about Star Wars for literal hours.
Nice. Unfortunately, though, I gotta get some sleep. Uh, Sorry. But it's been a pleasure talking with you. Where can people find you? If what relevant socials can people use to find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at SnapBoltBaral. I used to be on there a lot, not as much anymore. But I tweet sometimes about magic, sometimes about politics, sometimes about Yu-Gi-Oh, sometimes just about sports. Mostly just whatever I feel like talking about that day. And a lot of just like cheesy, mostly just make cheesy posts. But that's typically where I'm found most often. And I'm also in the skull symbol Discord as well at SnapBoltBaral if you ever want to get a game in.
Which is a happening place.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to get a game in with you again sometime. It's been a little while.
It has been. It should be. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit more time here with the holidays coming up.
We should. That would be very nice if that did happen. It's been hectic. But,
And knock on wood.
yeah, knock on wood. Yeah. Alright, so it's been awesome to have you, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.
All right, thanks, Coach. Hope you have a good night.
Thank you, too.